Okay, let's get going. Welcome everyone, and we're really pleased to be here to present to you Magenta's webinar all about how to change your world with your money. As a quick introduction for you, Magenta is a small firm of financial planners based in Bridgend in South Wales. At Magenta, we believe in delivering financial planning with passion. We're proud to be a firm of chartered financial planners, accredited by the Initiative of Financial Wellbeing and part of the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association. Being more sustainable and green is something close to our hearts, and we are passionate about showing people how they can have real impact with their money. In this presentation, we will refer to the catch-all term of green investments at various points. By green investments, we simply mean doing good with your money and not just solely seeking an investment return. We will explain this more later on in the presentation. So to introduce us, I'm Gretchen Betts and I'm founder and MD at Magenta. I'm a chartered and certified financial planner, and I'm a financial coach too. Today, I'm joined by Jamie Fluke, also a chartered financial advisor, and Jessica Gear, our associate financial planner. Jamie is going to help me present to you today, and Jess is going to manage and facilitate the session with managing the chat and the Q&A. Please do submit any questions you may have as we go along, and we'll be able to answer these at the end of today's session. The session will probably last 35 to 40 minutes, and the Q&A is found on the banner along the bottom.
Thanks, Gretchen. In this presentation, we're going to take a brief trip back in time to the year 2000 to revisit what the world looked like at the time when viewed through the lens of the topic at hand. We'll then focus on the present day and explain just what you can do in both your day-to-day life and, importantly, with your money to make a difference with the world. Last, for what it's worth, we'll give you our prediction for the future. So first, let's take a brief trip back and understand what the world looked like at that time. Firstly, there was less awareness of how damaged the environment was and how quickly it was continually deteriorating. Carbon was just an element on the periodic table, and we knew little about its impact. There was less awareness of the companies we invested in and how our lifestyles dictated how those companies behaved. For example, we knew much less about the societal impacts of mining, what we now know as blood diamonds, and the impacts of the clothing industry on workforces in developing nations, particularly through what is now known as fast fashion. There was no coordinated way to measure humanity's progress. We couldn't really tell if what we were doing as humanity was good. There was the very blunt and frankly irrelevant measurement by the growth of economies in GDP, but that only measures return and not impact. Catch-all ethical funds were the only investment option, of which there were a few, and they were seen as an idealistic choice. You had little real choice if you wanted to do good with your money. And it was widely accepted that you had to sacrifice investment returns in return for your ideals. That was the trade-off. Whether this was true in the past is up for debate. However, importantly, is it the case now? We'll answer this later on. And in that 20 or so years, we've come a long way to the present day. And actually, the majority of the progress has been made in the most recent decade. In 2012, we had the introduction of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. More on those in a moment. In 2015, we had the Paris Climate Agreement, where the world collectively committed to keep the increase in global temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade when compared with the pre-industrial era. Shortly after, we had the popularization of the phrase ESG, meaning environmental, social, and governance, as ways of measuring the impact companies have on the world. This was a direct result of governments around the world committing to change and providing a framework for businesses to use to help effect that change. And then, of course, in 2018, Greta Thunberg helped start the movement of school children going on strike on Fridays, which was designed to make the world sit up and take notice of the unhappiness of the next generation at the state of the world they'd be inheriting. 2021 saw the launch of the Earthshot Prize, fronted by Prince William and David Attenborough. And the prize is designed to incentivize change and to help repair our planet over the next 10 years. It is centered around 5 Earthshots, providing money for projects in which organizations are trying to better the environment in the world. And of course, very recently, we had COP26, in which it was agreed to phase out coal usage, fossil fuel subsidies, and end all deforestation by 2030, amongst other pledges to try and slow down and eventually reverse the damage done to the environment. And we can see just from this that awareness is growing rapidly about what we need to do, and action is being taken. And so the goals that I referenced, as I said, they were set in 2012 by the UN. They're the first of their kind, aiming for global sustainable development, particularly in poorer and developing parts of the world, with clearly defined aims to be met by 2030. Now, each goal has specific targets within it. For instance, within Goal 1, no poverty, there are 7 underlying specific targets. Now, to appreciate the scale of what is required for the UN to meet their goals by 2030, they say there needs to be $5 to $7 trillion going into sustainable projects each year. Now, that, unfortunately, is considerably more than the $3 trillion that is currently on offer as commitment from governments and private finance globally combined.
So what can you do today to help towards these global UN goals and save CO2? Well, these images show some of the things you could do personally to save CO2 each year, and they can all be mainly done in your home. So we know that if we recycle, that's good. We can save CO2 in that way. And actually, per person per year, you could save about 0.1 tonnes by recycling at home. You could go vegan, and that could save 0.9 tonnes. In fact, if you eat only 1 piece of meat each week, rather than going fully vegan, you could still just do a half, eat 1 piece less each week. Over a lifetime, you could save 35.6 tonnes of CO2 emissions. You could choose to drive electric, and that can save 2 tonnes of CO2 per person per year. You could install a heat pump at home, saving 1.6 tonnes. You can choose to fly less, and that could save 1.9 tonnes. In fact, by taking 1 less international flight per year, per person, it indicates you could save 18.9 tonnes of CO2 emissions in your lifetime. And you could use less plastic. Again, this could save 0.1 tonnes. There's a couple of other things like shortening your showers that you take every day and taking the train instead of driving the car. Now, some of these are easier than others and, of course, more practical. We all know that electric vehicles aren't yet really affordable for everybody. And the things that are easy to do, like recycling, have a smaller impact, as illustrated by the numbers in this slide. But these small things are all great to do. However, according to calculations made by Nordia's sustainable finance team, moving your pension savings to sustainable funds can be 27 times more efficient than any other way that you can try to reduce your carbon footprint. This means you could do all the things on the other slide that I've talked about, but it would take 27 times longer to achieve the same effect than you could by applying a sustainable or green fund to your pension. I wanted also to talk a little bit more about how we can just generally be more impactful with our money. So, as just mentioned, maybe switching money saved in your workplace pension fund to a green option and ensuring any future contributions that you make to that fund is invested in the same way. And if those funds aren't available from your provider, we strongly recommend that you put pressure on the provider to offer these options, and we think they'll become more readily available. You can also consider combining all your old pensions if you've worked in various different places and invest all of them in green funds. You could switch to an ethical bank, and this is now pretty easy to research. You can, for example, find on Money Saving Expert online his summary of ethical banks, and you can switch quite easily. And then you could think about your additional savings, those things over and above cash, like maybe contributions to individual savings accounts or ISAs as we call them. You can put those into green funds. And finally, because I think it's really important to think about both what you're saving, but also spending, you can consider how you shop for food and clothes. So being able to research smaller independent companies and shop local. And there's a great website online called locallyuk.com where you can research those types of businesses around your local area. So there's some things to start.
We've talked very briefly or mentioned green funds. So you can see that there are 3 highlighted there within that green box. There are 3 different types mentioned there. Now we know there is no right way for everyone to invest their money. People's preferences for the impact they want their money to have can range from not really being concerned, for which a traditional investment would likely suit, to being more concerned with the impact their money is having than the return that can be achieved. There are, of course, a significant number of people who fall somewhere in between these 2 points on the spectrum and would likely want to do some good with their money, but also are concerned with the return they achieve. In addition, some people have more specific concerns. For instance, if you are vegan, you'd likely not want your money invested in companies involved in meat and dairy production and distribution. Investment options exist whereby your specific preferences can be incorporated and these types of companies can be avoided. We know as well as anyone that there is a lot of jargon involved in the area of green investments. So we thought it'd be useful to explain what we mean by the main 3 phases you may have heard of before, highlighted in that box. So ESG investing incorporates the environmental, social, and governance factors referenced earlier. Essentially, this way of investing is trying to offer a standardized way of blocking out the bad things. Companies can therefore be graded on their impact on the environment, the impact they have on society, and how well governed they are. Next, ethical screening usually involves filtering out specific industries or practices. Some typical examples are tobacco, weapons, alcohol, animal testing, genetic engineering, and gambling. Now, this list is not exhaustive, and different investment providers will take different views on what they screen out. The idea behind screening is that there's still a lot left available for investment managers to invest in to try and generate return. And the last of the 3 is positive impact. Now, positive impact is focused on incorporating both the ESG criteria as well as an extensive list of ethical screening. Importantly, where it does differ, is that positive impact also actively looks to provide solutions to address the world's problems. So, for example, being able to provide access to clean water, healthcare, and education in developing countries, by being closely aligned to the UN Sustainable Goals, whilst also trying to generate returns for the investor. So, as a reminder, we're grouping the middle 3 categories you can see there of the 5 under the banner of green funds. Now, at Magenta, where someone comes to us and says that they would like their money to do good, our preference generally, in most cases, is to recommend positive impact funds. And the reason for that is because it ticks all 3 boxes, kind of straddles all 3 of the lines you can see below. It seeks investment returns, it avoids harm, and it's seeking solutions to the world's problems. To us, this is one of those rare examples where you can have your cake and eat it, doing good for the world and for you. And so over the next 2 slides, we wanted to show 4 real-life examples of holdings that are held within positive impact managers' portfolios that we recommend to some of our clients. First, on the left-hand side, you can see there, Moderna. Now, you may well know them for being one of the COVID vaccine manufacturers. So money invested in them by people choosing in their investments by fund managers has helped provide funding to rapidly research and scale up production of a vaccine which has potentially saved millions of lives, of course, contributing to health around the world. The other logo you see there is SMS. So SMS stands for Smart Metering Systems, and they roll out smart meters for electricity in homes across the UK. They're the company behind your home energy supplier pestering you to get one installed for free. Of course, this makes those who have smart meters in their home aware of how much energy they're using and how they can be more energy efficient. This in turn reduces carbon output and saves people money, benefiting both the environment and society. And here are the two others. Firstly, Safaricom is a mobile network operator serving over 35 million rural and urban customers across Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. The company owns mobile network infrastructure and offers digital money services that enable mobile users to send, borrow, and save. And mobile access to financial services supports local entrepreneurship and removes barriers to socio-economic development. So, as the market leader, it's contributed significantly to lifting Kenya's financial inclusion rate from 14% in 2006 to 83% in 2019. So a huge jump. And then lastly, on the right-hand side, Vestas. Now, Vestas Wind Systems is a Danish renewable energy solution company that produces, designs, installs and services wind turbines across the world. And wind is now on a par with solar power as one of the cheapest alternatives to fossil fuels, which, as we know, we desperately need to phase out. In 2020, Vestas wind turbines generated 435 million megawatt hours of renewable electricity, avoiding 186 million tons of carbon emissions. And this is about the same as taking 40 million passenger cars off the road in a year. The activities these companies perform and the way they go about them align with the UN sustainability goals, and importantly, have provided a very good return for investors over the last couple of years. Now, these are just some of the typical holdings you would likely find within a positive impact portfolio.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Sorry, I muted myself there. We thought we'd better cover off some of the common concerns and myths that we hear when talking about going green with investments. So the three that we typically hear are that people are skeptical and they don't believe that the money can actually have that much impact. The second is that the returns won't be as high and that they will have to sacrifice returns. And thirdly, that investing in a green way is much more risky than a traditional investment approach. So we thought we'd try and deal with each of these in turn for you today. In the past, it's certainly been hard to be able to illustrate real impact that money might be having. Other than through an ethical portfolio, which might provide specific managers' reports about the underlying funds. And that information seemed to be word heavy, quite difficult to understand. However, things are changing. One of the investment managers we often use can provide personalized calculators now for clients that are linked to the UN goals. This is an example of how it's measured. So on the screen, you can see a sample of what a portfolio might look like and how it might be assessed against the UN goals. So for example, if your money was in this portfolio, you would know that it ticked the following boxes. It, for example, has got 12% invested aligned with UN Goal 3, which is good health and well-being. It's got 6.9% invested aligned with UN Goal 6, clean water and sanitation. And it's got 2.8% invested in UN Goal 10, for example, which is about reducing inequalities. More importantly, in the centre, you can see it's 81% aligned to the UN goals. Why this is really important is when we start comparing that with other examples and benchmarks, for example. So here on this slide, we've got a positive impact portfolio versus the benchmark of the FTSE 100 and the MSCI World. The FTSE 100 being the largest 100 companies listed on the UK Stock Exchange, and the MSCI World being a representation of a global stock market. So you can see that the positive impact portfolio is 82% positively aligned to the UN goals and 18% neutral. The MSCI World is 40% UN goals aligned, positive, sorry, and 44% neutral, 16% negative. The FTSE 100 is 42% positively aligned to the UN goals, 27% neutral, and 31% negative. We believe more and more green fund providers are going to need to be able to prove the impact that you can have, and demand is rising for this information. We all want to understand exactly what's going on under the bonnet more, and it's becoming more important for people that they can ensure their investments align with their overall values.
Thanks, Gretchen. So that, I think that pretty conclusively shows that you can see just how much of an impact your money is having by being able to map it to the UN sustainability goals we talked about. And so coming on to myth 2 or misconception 2, do you have to sacrifice returns to invest in this way? Well, as you can pretty conclusively see from the chart here, we think you absolutely do not have to sacrifice returns to invest in this way. The returns you can see here from the positive impact portfolio significantly outperform the traditional way of investing, which, as a reminder, does not have any kind of ethical, ESG or impact considerations, and therefore those traditional fund managers can essentially invest in anything. Now, of course, as you can see, there was a drop during the initial COVID lockdowns in March 2020, but that would have been the same with pretty much any investment. Now, obviously, what we have to say is that past performance is no guide to future performance. And in addition, these were the returns for a balanced risk or mid-level risk investor, which is not going to be appropriate for everyone. And then coming on to the third misconception, is investing in this way more risky? Well, the short answer is that no, it isn't. It is true that years ago, there were certainly less green investment funds available and the underlying assets available to invest in. But that has changed over time, especially in the last few years. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of investment funds available that fit under the banner of green investments. The underlying investment options for fund managers have changed as well. An example of this is green bonds, which were made available to invest in earlier this year by the UK government. And money raised by these bonds is ring-fenced and designed to fund large infrastructure projects, such as changing the energy grid and providing subsidies for electric transport overhaul for both individuals and cities. As referenced earlier, there simply has to be more private money invested in this way for society to progress and the environment to heal. We therefore strongly believe there is no additional risk in investing this way, and that by doing so, you would not be in the idealistic minority, as may have been the case previously.
So we've established that you can do good with your money, and hopefully we've dispelled some of the myths for you as well, showing that you can still make money by doing good. But how do you know how much you need? No one knows how long they might live for. What will you do with your time, and how much will that cost potentially? How can you know that you will have enough? As well as thinking about your investments and making them more green, start really to focus on having a plan with your dreams and goals considered. That's really important. At Magenta, we can help by creating a financial lifetime cash flow forecast. This can help you plan and show you what the future might look like. We gather together all your personal information and take into account all your income, planned expenditure, both now and in retirement, your savings, investments, and any other assets you might have. And we put this all together into a package, into our software system, and generate a financial cash flow forecast. Using some assumptions, we can help you to understand how things might look in the future. Think of it as having a little time machine bubble, enabling you to look forward and foresee any concerns and bumps in the road that might come up along the way. And then if there are concerns, we can see what can be done now and make changes to make things look better for you and your family in the future. This really does underpin any discussion we have with clients around investment, and undertaking this type of planning can help you have peace of mind that you can be secure and happy throughout your life, enabling you therefore to feel confident that you can use your money for good, invested in the right way in the background. So choosing investments has to go hand in hand with a bigger picture plan for your finances and your life. We're coming to the end now, and as promised, we thought we'd share our predictions for the future of green investing. Well, we believe that green investing won't be the conscious choice. It will just become the norm. More and more focus will be put on sustainability by governments and therefore by extension into businesses. Harmful businesses will have to change because of loss of subsidies, negative PR, and loss of value compared with greener alternatives. Our lives will adapt to become greener. Whichever way you look at it, more finance is going to be concentrated in this way, and there will be real opportunities for investors. We will look back to this time as a real momentum and collective mindset shift to avert disaster and make the world a better place. Maybe we'll refer to this in the future as the Green Revolution. Who knows? So we've come to the end, and we now can have a little bit of Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that we've dispelled some myths, talked about a little bit about green investing and given you a sense of what that could look like, and also a little bit about the future. So Jess, have we got any questions in the Q&A?
So we haven't, but I have got some questions that I think would be really useful for anyone watching to know. So how many Magenta clients would you say are invested in this way?
Okay, good question. I mean, we set up Magenta 5 years ago, and we've seen a consistent increase year on year on the new client inquiries that we have that want to be invested in a green or sustainable way. So I would say now new inquiries are probably 70% of people end up investing in this way. When we look back at our current clients that we've got, probably we're nearer 45% invested in this way, but more and more people considering this every single year. So it's not just a small minority anymore. We are definitely becoming so that it's a much more of a more regular occurrence and discussion to be having with clients.
Yes, I agree. As it's becoming more popular, it's becoming more of a conversation that people want to bring to us.
Yeah.
So if there was anybody that wanted to now look into this a little bit more, where would you direct them to go?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So first of all, we've created a green guide, which is designed to accompany this webinar. So if you log on to the website, you'll be able to find it under the section of the website around green investments. So feel free to download that, have a read, and if there's anything more you want to learn about this type of thing, of course, you can contact us. We'd be very happy to have a chat with you to discuss it further. You can also seek out the UK Sustainable Investment Foundation, and they have access to more information on sustainable investments. And you can also, if you have a think about what you can do in your day-to-day life, you can also seek out ways to, for instance, change your bank, as Gretchen mentioned, to see what ethical options are available there with your bank. And also what you do in your day-to-day life, with things like your shopping. You can seek out a good publication that we are subscribed to at Magenta, which is Ethical Consumer. So they will be able to tell you who are the most ethical fashion retailers or places to buy electronics, those types of things, all those things you would have in day-to-day life.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. What about the charges then? Does it cost more to invest in this type of way?
Yeah, great question, Jess, and it's something, you know, we get asked all the time. So I guess it depends where you're starting from, what you're already invested in, but I'll give an example. So quite often if we are looking at a traditional investment, so with unconstrained investment, you might be looking at what we would call using a passive approach. So using tracker and index funds, which don't have an active management. So you buy an index, buy the market, and that will track what the market does. There will be no manager interaction into that. There won't be any changes made. It is a tracker, and it's a way of keeping costs down and therefore returns potentially higher for the client. If we look at green investing, and all of those varieties that we've talked about today, the reality is that that needs more active management. We don't really believe that it can be done in a passive way, although there are options out there, but we do believe that having an active manager, looking at those funds, establishing the quality of the company, what exactly is they're doing, what UN goals they're ticking, and also keeping them on the straight and narrow, knowing that if they overstep the mark and something's gone wrong and they're no longer in this green zone that we want them to be in, that they will actively push them out of a portfolio. So we think that having that active overlay is really important. And naturally, that because it requires humans and people doing things, you know, having conversations with companies, talking about what it is that they're doing, really understanding what's going on under the bonnet, that's going to cost a little bit more. But what we see on a regular basis is that those increase in charges are normally absorbed by investment returns and not causing any client really a sort of a significant detriment in return. But of course, that can't be guaranteed. But the charges, yeah, are slightly higher, but we do like to we try and keep them as low as we can. That's part of the role of having a financial planner involved.
That's brilliant. That's a really good answer. Thank you, Gretchen. So what happens if I like the sound of this? If a client came to you and they like the sound of all of this, but they weren't quite ready to go all in, would there be different options available to them?
So yeah, just to answer that, there are different options. As we said, you know, there's more than one type of green investment. So you could potentially look to split how you put your money in between them if you weren't quite sure where you were at in terms of, you know, what your preferences were, and you just wanted to test it. You can do that. And also we have a great number of our clients that we look after already have what we would term as more of the traditional investments, and have been very happy with how they've performed over time, but perhaps have got to the point where they would like to help make a difference with their money as well. And so you always have the ability to kind of dip your toe in, if you like, and you can move some of that money that you have into a green investment fund. And you know, that can happen because, you know, some of those myths, those misconceptions, they can hang around, and people still may think that it may not perform as well as those more traditional investments. But typically what we see is once they've given it time, perhaps a year or two, to see how those perform, then normally they become more confident and are happy to put more of their money into green investment funds. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when anyone comes to us and we talk about this, you know, we always say that, you know, any preferences that you've got around how your money is invested can pretty much always be accommodated. So it's an open conversation we're very happy to have.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. So we spoke earlier about the risk side of it? Is it more risky to go in this way, to invest in this way? If somebody came to you that was naturally a very cautious person, they didn't want any high risk investments in their portfolio, would they be able to invest with a positive impact?
So, yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Jess, because you know, I've got experience now, probably almost 15 years of being involved in ethical choices for clients and thinking about a range of different green funds that have been available. And the reality is that probably 6 or 7 years ago, the same funds weren't really available or mainstream. So we did used to have to talk about risk being a factor, and typically we wouldn't invest anyone who wasn't willing to take like a medium risk, because there wasn't really the kind of like green bond options that are around now, which form such a crucial part of a cautious portfolio. And so typically it was more stocks and shares led that would end up in a portfolio like that, which would naturally make it more risky. So, but what we've seen in the last 6 to 7 years is that things really have opened out a lot, and there are more and more different types of investment opportunities available, which fund managers have been able to use to develop portfolios that map the type of risk conversations that we have with clients. So for example, our risk profiles or our risk profiler that we do with every client will come out, you will be between 1 and 7, 1 being lowest risk and 7 being highest. So before, I would be sort of going, unless you were a 4, you probably couldn't go into this type of investment. But for the last 6 or 7 years, it's been kind of much more open. So we are able to, provided you're not a 1, because really we can't invest for anyone who is that low risk. They don't want to take any risk. But anything above that, there is a range of different portfolios that can be mapped to suit that risk profile. So the answer is, you definitely don't have to take more risk. We just need to take the amount of risk that's appropriate for you and for the client. Yeah.
That's really good. That was really important to reiterate. So thank you. That's all the questions from me anyway.
Fabulous. Well, if there's nothing else, we just want to say thank you for everyone who's joined us. We are recording the webinar and it will be available to re-listen back on our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for everyone for dialing in. Thank you to Jess and Jamie. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.